Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Demilitarized Zone. This is the one stream designed to help you feel better about engaging in hot-button issues with people you disagree with. Our goal here is to teach discourse survival tactics, not just farm gotchas and dunks. We are trying to cultivate meaningful, intelligent conversations where you have to stop and listen to the other person, even if it is just to find the flaws in what they are saying. So please attack the belief, not the believer. At least for tonight, check your weapons at the door, take notes, act like grown-ups, and refrain from the blood sports and shit-slinging that have plagued our society for far too long. Also, here the audience gets a say. There will be a link in the chat after the debate to where you can vote for the winning team. Please limber up those voting fingers, it is free after all, and exercise your democratic right to decide which side made the most persuasive case. Now, we're going to go through the debaters first. We're going to let them all introduce themselves real quick, starting with the captain of the affirmative team, Vigilante TV. Vigi, please tell the folks a little bit about who you are and where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm the Vigilante TV. You can find me here on Twitch, TikTok, and on YouTube under the same name. I mostly do politics. I do some gaming streams every so often. It just kind of depends. Mostly just do stuff like this, though.
All right. And meeting him across the aisle, our captain for the negative team is McGroofus. Groofus, please tell everybody who you are and where they can find you.
So I'm McGroofus on Twitch and on Discord. You can find me there, and Resident ANCAP, and I am here to debate Citizens United today, finally.
Finally, indeed. All right, good stuff. And your number 2 affirmative debater is known as Ancom SciCom. Please, Ancom, share with the people who you are, where they can find you.
I'm Ancom SciCom, the resident anarcho-communist. You can find me on Discord at Ancom SciCom. That's pretty much it. I don't really do the whole social media thing.
That's all right. It's weird for me too. All right. And the second debater on the negative team, new guy to the field, Chuck Unmoney. We don't actually have your socials, Chuck, so if you could get those to me as soon as possible. But please tell the folks who you are and where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me at Chuck Unmoney on X and on Discord. I participate in politics and things, comment on stuff, have a libertarian bent, more of an individualist. But I'm interested in what everyone has to say.
I do want to know what a libertarian bend looks like. But we're going to go to our third debater on the affirmative. That is that cyber squirrel with the giant nuts. TesticleJohnson, please tell the folks who you are and where they can find you.
Yes, I am TesticleJohnson. I am the resident bad boy. Some would say eye candy. I am just more of a shit poster generally. I do enjoy serious political conversations, so you'll probably see me floating around in people's chats. I do have a Twitter. It's just TesticleJohnson. It's probably not worth following. I'm basically a bot account. I just repost the things I find funny, and on occasion I will shit post on there. But yeah, I'm excited for the conversation.
Right on, and I'm pretty sure that that's what Twix is for. So, all right, last but not least, returning runner-up, almost winner, maybe winner of last season, regular here on the channel, everybody's favorite Castle. Please tell everyone who you are and where they can find you, sir.
Sure. So you know me by Castle on here. You can find me on Twitter at CastleGuardYT. Streaming, usually just doing the debates here, but looking to make more YouTube videos in the future. I'm kind of a left-leaning, moderate Dem liberal who likes to tweet about politics, pop culture, sports, you name it. If there's an opinion on it, I'll probably have it. So yeah, you can find most of my opinions on there or here on Horseradish's channel.
And we are definitely fucking honored for that, sir. So, all right. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a very quick rundown, a super duper TLDR. For those of you who do not know, the Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission was what people commonly refer to as corporate personhood decision. It was a court decision that basically gave more privileges, rights, civil liberties to corporations, or better codified them. So the prompt tonight is the decision of Citizens United versus Federal Election Commissions should be overturned. And I am certain that this debate prompt is in capable hands tonight, and the 6 gentlemen around me are all going to explain to you the pros and cons of that decision. Now, everybody here knows the format. It's going to be 3-minute open, 3-minute cross, 3-minute open, 3-minute cross. We're going to go back and forth until everybody's had a turn. Then we're going to go through the champion rounds where there's going to be 10 minutes on the clock between the 2 debaters who have not gone yet. It is going to be the captain's responsibility to decide who goes in what order, and they're going to be able to call audibles on the fly. Speaking of audibles, I would like to remind the captains as well that in this case, the ceasefires are in your hands. If a captain wants to speak up and call for a ceasefire, we will stop the clock and fact check or introduce information at that time. So that is going to be in y'all's hands to do. That is a power you possess. Now, if anybody has any further questions, send them to me. Remember, chat, at the end of this, I'm going to give you guys the link. You guys are the only ones deciding on who wins tonight, which team made the best case. But also, remember, for just $2, slip it into the tip jar, and we will pose your question to the debaters in the Q&A section. If we hit $30, we split it with the winning team. So, that said, I'm going to go ahead and look this over to you, Vigilante. Your team is going first on the affirmative. Who is going to be the first one to open on your team, Vigi?
We're going to do what you should never do, and the testicles are going to go first.
He's putting the testicles in first. All right, cheers. Then in that case, testes. 3 minutes is on the clock. Please bring your opening, sir. I'll start the clock when you start to talk.
Alrighty, just give me a moment. I'm going to center myself. Feel zen. All right, so the question is whether Citizens United versus FEC should be overturned. Our answer collectively is yes, but before I get into the argument of why this should be the case, I want to clear up what we're not going to be saying. So we're not saying that Citizens United legalized direct corporate donations to candidates. That's simply not true. We're not saying that Citizens United single-handedly created every campaign finance problem in America. Definitely not. And we are not saying that corporations, unions, nonprofits, that they don't have a right to speak. Under the old precedent, they could still speak, lobby, publish, endorse, advocate, and organize using PACs. So what actually changed? In order to understand this, we need to give a very brief timeline of how we got here. So in 1976, there's Buckley v. Vallejo, and this protected independent expenditures, largely because the court treated uncoordinated spending as less corrupting than direct contributions. Fast forward to 1990, which is Austin v. Michigan Chambers of Commerce. This drew an important line. Corporations could be restricted from using general treasury funds for independent expenditures on candidate elections. Skip again to 2003, and we have McConnell versus FEC. This upheld major parts of McCain-Feingold, which included limits on corporate and union-funded electioneering communications. So those are the 2 things to keep in mind: general treasury funds for independent expenditures and electioneering communications. We have something established. Then came the Citizens United versus FEC case in 2010. So that decision overruled Austin and parts of McConnell. It said corporations and unions could not be banned from making independent political expenditures. Citizens United overruled Austin's and part of McConnell, as I mentioned, that allowed these restrictions on corporate electioneering communications. It's also important to note that later that same year, there was a case called SpeechNow.org versus FEC. This used the same logic from the previous case to establish what we now know today as super PACs. So one sort of led to the other. So Citizens United is not simply protected free speech. It's allowing large artificial legal entities to accumulate a treasury to influence candidate elections. Very briefly, Justice Stevens, along with others from the case, in the dissenting opinion, said that this is a how, not if, Citizens United could speak. Neither Citizens United nor any corporation's speech had been banned. I want that to be very clear. This is not a free speech issue. So, okay. So, the last thing that's worth mentioning is the concept which may come up, which is dark money. So, dark money existed before this decision. So this did not create the invention of dark money. However, the scale changed dramatically. Just one quick factoid before I finish here. Open Secrets found that non-party independent group spending went from 750 million from 1990 to 2010 to 4.5 billion from 2010 to 2020. Outside spending surpassed candidate spending in 126 races after the ruling, compared to 15 races in the 5 cycles before it. Citizens United should be overturned because democracy is not built on purchased amplification. Thank you.
All right. Now, Groofus, who do you have cross-examining testicles?
Castle Guard, I choose you.
Okay. So then in that case, Castle. TesticleJohnson, Castle. 3 minutes is on the clock for you, Castle. You know how to use it. Cross-examine as you see fit, sir.
Yeah, so you brought up two things that I thought were interesting. The first being that um, you mentioned that, you could still, before this decision, have corporation use PACs to speak on political issues. But when you say that the issue is whether that the government could force citizens to speak only through a regulated PAC structure, isn't that kind of like saying your free speech isn't restricted because you're still allowed to speak, but only after you've filled out paperwork or created a separate legal entity? Don't you think that's a bit misleading?
Um, so misleading so what I did say was that under the old precedent, they were still allowed to speak, lobby, publish, endorse, organize, and advocate. So, so you're asking by putting limits on that if it's limiting their speech?
Yeah, essentially, like if you told me that I have free speech, but I only have it after filling out certain paperwork, is that really free speech or is that limiting my free speech?
I mean, I would sort of bite that bullet if that were the case, but I think the point that I'm making specifically is that their speech was not impacted. I mean, in the specific ruling for this, it was in regards to a documentary. I forget the name. It was Hillary something. I should know it off the top of my head, but this was basically that they couldn't release this within 30 days of, I believe it was the primary. So nothing was affected in terms of what they were allowed to advocate for. The only thing that changed was the electioneer communications and then independent treasury funds or unlimited independent treasury funds.
But how could you say that things weren't impacted if the decision was that they literally couldn't release this movie? I think it was a movie.
Well, things.
However
Oh,
many
sorry.
days
Go ahead.
before the election. No, that was,
Right. Well,
that was mostly it.
sure. Well, I wouldn't say that not that things weren't impacted. I mean, this had long-reaching implications, right? Which is sort of what we're arguing here. Um, it sounds like what you're saying is more of a, I guess maybe something on scale, like maybe the scale of what was impacted. I guess, I mean, I understand it's your question time, but I would have to know like what you're suggesting was impacted. What limit, apart from again those two uh, things, like I don't understand how their speech specifically would have been affected by this.
Okay, just for timing, I just want to get to my second one. But you said that dark money existed before this decision, but the scale changed dramatically because non-party interest group spending increased. So, if independent spending increased after Citizens United, does that not automatically mean the decision was unconstitutional or should be overturned?
I don't necessarily see the correlation. I don't understand how the increase in spending would therefore somehow validate that it was the correct decision or that it would be unconstitutional. Um, yeah, because sorry, maybe I'm not understanding. I understand that time's limited. Could you
Well,
maybe just quick?
Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
if horse will allow
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
just to clarify, it's just that one of your points was just saying how the scale of dark money increased because of this, but that's not really a legal point. That's right. Would you agree? That's not really part of the constitutionality of the case.
Sure, I can agree. I would say that it was maybe something of a domino effect. I wouldn't say that the um, Yeah, because as I mentioned as well, the super PAC creation came later on, very shortly after. I believe it was a couple of months with SpeechNow.org versus FEC. So I would say that they are intimately related. One sort of set the premise for the other, and that's how it sort of played out. So there was a political implication. But to directly answer your question, no, I wouldn't say that by itself in isolation. It was the political sort of avenue.
All right, good stuff.
Cool.
Castle, it is now going to be your turn. 3 minutes is on the clock for your opening. Let them have it.
All right, so the prompt today is whether Citizens United versus the FEC should be overturned. At its core, Citizens United was not really about whether money influences politics. Money influenced politics long before Citizens United, and it still would without it. The real constitutional question was much simpler. Can the government restrict political speech based on who's speaking and how they organize themselves? The case, obviously, like we talked about, began back in 2008 with Hillary Clinton releasing when she was running in 2008, government argued that this company had the right to be blocked from submitting this movie that spoke negatively about her and restrict that distribution because it qualified as electioneering communication. So, if we think about what it means, if you want to overturn Citizens United, you're arguing that the government should be allowed to restrict political speech from corporations, unions, nonprofits, and advocacy groups, whatever that speech happens to be too close to an election. So, where does that stop? If three friends pooled their money together to create a documentary criticizing a politician, should they lose free speech protections because they organized a group instead of acting individually? And if one self funded billionaire did the exact same message alone, suddenly that becomes protected again? That's the contradiction at the center of the negative's position. The government was not targeting money equally. The law heavily restricted people organizing together while doing very little to stop wealthy individuals from speaking on their own. And history proves that. We've seen George Soros, Michael Bloomberg, Ross Perot, both of those last two funded their own campaigns through their own money. Tom Steyer and Sheldon Adelson are huge mega donors shaping political messaging across the country. So the money was always there and the influence was always there. And the question becomes, if wealthy people are still going to spend money on politics anyway, why are we sacrificing our own constitutional speech protections in the process? Now, to be clear, it doesn't mean that all regulation is unconstitutional. Congress absolutely has a role regulating corruption, transparency, foreign money, disclosure requirements, and direct coordination between campaigns and outside groups. But my opponents may argue that the distinction is messy in reality. But constitutional rights are not abandoned simply because enforcement is imperfect. If illegal coordination occurs, then enforce coordination laws. If dark money laws are weak, Congress can strengthen those disclosure requirements. Once government can regulate the money used to distribute speech, government can regulate speech. And this is why even organizations like the ACLU express support for key free speech principles underlying Citizens United ruling. The negative side also struggles with a major political practical problem defining what counts as electioneering communication. What if I wrote a book about climate change during an election year and one candidate repeatedly cites it? Did I just influence an election? Did my publisher? Did social media platforms amplifying discussion about it? Practically any speech can become political depending on timing, context, or public reaction. That is exactly why broad government power over political advocacy becomes dangerous. So, in a free society, the answer to speech we dislike is not less speech enforced by government power. It is more speech, more debate, and ultimately trusting voters, not the government, to decide what ideas deserve to win.
All right, thank you, sir. And Vigi, who's going to cross-examine Castle?
And come.
Ancom is. All right, very good. 3 minutes is on the clock for you now. Ancom, go ahead and start when you're ready, sir.
Sure. Castle, do you know what the legal definition of electioneering communication is?
The legal definition, I do not.
Okay. The legal definition is an electioneering communication is any broadcast, cable, or satellite communication that refers to a clearly identified federal candidate, is publicly distributed within 30 days of a primary or 60 days of a general election, and is targeted to the relevant electorate. So it is not as wishy-washy of a term as you seem to allude to in your opening statement. Would you agree with that?
Well, in the case of in the case of the ruling, the whole point was to ensure that people had that right regardless of whether it was 30, 60, whatever days from an election, right? So the whole point was to make, if there's free speech, there's free speech. If you want it to be 30, 60, 90 days to not have free speech, that's against the First Amendment, though, right?
Well, the problem is that Citizens United versus FEC didn't actually remove the electioneering communication restriction, did it?
That would, well, how is that so? Because that was part of the whole case.
Except the regulation still exists under the FEC. They still have the ability to enforce that under certain circumstances. Citizens United just limited the number of circumstances they could use it under.
Well, what would the circumstances be that they do have it still used for today?
So originally, this was the this was the MCFL, right? So in FEC versus the Massachusetts Citizens for Life case, the court created a 3-part test for which nonprofits could make independent expenditures, including things like electioneering communication. They have to be formed for ideological purposes, have no shareholders, and not accept corporate money. That's a test that they created, right?
Sure, if I'm taking that right. Yep.
Yep. All right. So then why would you say that 3-part test existed? Like why did they make that exception with those 3 parts?
So I think the last part you mentioned was about corporations don't. Could you say that last part one more time? Because I think that was the
Yeah.
part I had issue with. Yeah.
So the third part was that the nonprofit could not accept corporate money. They couldn't accept donations from corporations,
Right.
labor unions, etc.
Okay, but then
So the
those
question
are
is,
kind
why
of
do you think that why were those 3 elements, the ideological purposes, no shareholders, not accepting corporate money, why did that exception with those specific test parameters exist?
You can take a moment to answer that.
okay. Yeah. So I was gonna say for a nonprofit to take in corporate money, what kind of defeats the purpose, in my opinion, why that rule exists specifically for that type of situation, right? If a nonprofit is operating on their own and uses their own money, that's fine. But if a corporation is then donating to that nonprofit, I could see that that's where there can be legal issues. So in the cases that you're providing, where there are certain examples of where the electioneering communication is stopping certain things from happening, and then what the actual case lifted restrictions on. Again, I wasn't arguing that there cannot be any regulation, and I think that Congress can even possibly could make the argument enforce more. But I think that in terms of what the case was able to free up, did a lot more for free speech, and I think that's the kind of the crux of my point. That's
All right.
all in that.
Good stuff. All right, so we're going to go ahead and kick this over to you now, Ancom. 3 minutes on the clock for your opening, uninterrupted. I'll start when you do.
All right. So the basic crux of my argument here is that Citizens United versus the FEC created a path for dark money to be brought into election campaigns that previous court decisions had managed to block off. So the specific path here is that Citizens United allowed corporations to give unlimited sums to nonprofit 501c4s for any political activity. Because 501c4s do not have to disclose donors, and 501c4s can then contribute to super PACs and other large political organizations, super PACs having to disclose their own contributors doesn't allow you to actually see where the money came from because of the money funneled through the 501c4s. Now, the MCFL exception, specifically that third part about not being funded by corporations, prevented this. Citizens United versus FEC, that reversed this protection mechanism that allowed us to be able to be transparent, to see who is donating money to what organizations through what routes. So the fact that now you can donate to 501c4s and then they can pass that money on and essentially completely obfuscate their donor base is the problem that I'm bringing up here. It allows the money that is being funneled into politics to be hidden from the rest of us to be able to look into what is creating this. Now, I know the argument against this is going to be, well, the IRS should just change the rules around 501c4s and how they have to disclose their donors. But the point is that Citizens United opened up this legal loophole for this to begin in the first place because they already had a protection against it. So by overturning that particular element of Citizens United, by restricting nonprofits, which are ideologically based and have no shareholders, and returning the restriction from corporate donations to those organizations, that alone would give us more transparency into our political donation system and into the money that is going into the various advertisements and electioneering campaigns that we see in our media. Thank you.
All right. Groofus, who is going to be cross-examining NCOM?
Chuck.
Chuck is going to cross-examine NCOM. All right, 3 minutes is on the clock for you there, Chuck. You know what to do with it.
Right. So you're concerned about super PACs not being transparent, but isn't there also a Disclosure Act meant to expose dark money? And how does Citizens United impact that?
The Disclosure Act, can you give the specific name of that act? Because Disclosure Act is a little bit vague.
I believe it's the Democracy is Strengthened by Casting Light on Spending in Elections Act. It requires super PACs, 501c4s to dark money groups, corporations, other spending over $10,000 on elections or judicial nominations to disclose.
So, sorry, let me just clarify what you're saying here. So you believe that the Disclosure Act forces 501c4s to disclose donors who make political donations over a certain amount of money?
No, it's what I'm asking is, wouldn't the Disclosure Act, which is currently being considered, wouldn't that be a solution to this problem without modifying Citizens United or getting rid of it?
Possibly it could, but the whole point is that Citizens United opened up a legal loophole that needed to be closed in the first place. This isn't the only complaint we have with it. It is one of the complaints that I decided to focus on in this debate, and my teammates will be pointing out others. So this one particular law, not the fact that it's over $10,000, so they could easily get around that by just making multiple small donations as well. I think that a number of these don't fully address the problem. And also, just out of curiosity, since you said it's going through Congress, do you know the political party of the representatives or senators who initially put this bill forward?
I don't off the top of my head. No.
Okay. All right. Just curious about that. I thought it might give some additional context.
Yeah. Let's see here. Yeah, so I really think that your problem is not even with Citizens United, because there are other cases that have addressed other things like accumulated or aggregate. I think it is the actual term, aggregate donations that allow people to get past some of these limits or some of these non-disclosure, and that Citizens United is fundamentally is about a free speech issue. It's not about what you're even discussing or bringing up.
All right.
I'm
Was
just gonna
there a
quick
question there?
respond to this.
Okay, go ahead.
I believe there was, if not direct. Or I believe that my argument is against what Citizens United did, and that the argument is that one of the ways to remediate this specific issue would be to overturn it. There may be other ways to remediate it. The problem is that your claim about free speech, which I believe my teammates will get deeper into, doesn't actually hold up under scrutiny. So there are multiple reasons that we believe Citizens United should be overturned. Mine is specifically the transparency in political spending.
All right, good stuff. So we're going to go ahead and kick this over to you now, Chuck. Your turn to open. 3 minutes on the clock. I'll start it when you start to talk.
Thank you. Yeah, so one of the core issues of this case is the free speech element of it. Specifically, this case, it was brought back to be listened to a second time to discuss a larger, broader issue because the government admitted to being able to ban books or other materials. And then, according to the later decision, unsuccessfully argued about that. Now, one of the things that I have a concern about is the ban, not necessarily specifically of the banning, but in general, is just the arbitrary nature of campaign finance and the ability for the government to arbitrarily ban different things when it feels like it needs to be. So, for example, there are multiple thinkers throughout history who have touched on the arbitrary nature of government, and government itself will build up power and then use that to repress other people. The main problem that people have with Citizens United is that the government is using its power arbitrarily, which upsets people, and then the system is used to benefit others, making it feel unfair and illegitimate, which has caused a lot of division in the country and concerns over campaign finance. In general, corporations, when they have small minorities, corporations tend to work in small minorities, whether they're groups of individuals working together, and they tend to, in these small concentrated groups, they tend to have more power over a general democracy where they're not where the general voter base is not paying attention, but a specific individual minority that's motivated can lobby or push. But companies typically will want to lobby or donate to both sides of the candidate, and they don't want to actually put their actual things out in the front, because if they get called on it, then they will when they get called on it, then they can have negative repercussions. For example, we've seen it with different CEOs making public statements. I believe Whole Foods made public statements. Target's made public statements. We had the Bud Light commercial where they make a public statement, it backfires and causes them a lot of problems. So corporations aren't really interested in the side of donating directly to impact campaigns or elections. They'll donate both sides evenly, so the money isn't a major problem. But those are all separate issues where the focus is the First Amendment problem, banning speech.
All right. Well, now I guess we only have one more person, and that's going to be, I guess you, Vigilante, are going to be cross-examining Chuck. 3 minutes is on the clock for you, sir. Go ahead and start it up when you're ready.
So during your cross-ex of ANCOM, you brought up the disclosure requirements. Obviously the disclosure requirements were upheld by the courts, correct?
I don't know specifically if they were.
Okay, they were upheld 8-1. Under the disclosure rules, political spending over $200 must be reported to the FEC, correct?
I believe that is correct. I don't know the actual number.
Okay, due
I
to
do know
Citizens
that
United,
disclosure, if you don't mind, I do know that there are disclosure requirements. I don't know the exact number though.
Yeah. So due to the way that the Citizens United was framed, a corporation can now contribute unlimited funds to a 501c4 nonprofit, correct?
I believe so, though I don't know if it's specifically unlimited funds. I do know that there were later court cases that definitely made it so it was unlimited funds.
Yep. So a 501c4 does not have to disclose its donors, correct?
Not this time. That is something that's being worked on, I believe, in Congress.
So if a 501c4 contributes to a super PAC and the super PAC discloses its contributors, the disclosed contributor is the 501c4, correct?
It probably is. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't really understand what this has to do with Citizens United, though. It's not about the case. It's
Yeah,
about something else.
because no, it's totally about the case. It's because what Citizens United did was allow for corporations to sit there and dump a bunch of money into 501c4 nonprofits, which then can funnel that money into super PACs, which allows for unlimited dark money to be used into the system. Now, so it's been mentioned a couple times that this is a First Amendment issue, right? The First Amendment doesn't permit Congress to make categorical distinctions based on corporate identity of the speaker. You agree with that in the opinion, correct?
Yeah, I agree with the First Amendment. And also, I would like to add that the First Amendment is for political speech mainly. So to interfere with political speech, like was overturned with Citizens United, that is a core thing that the First Amendment is for.
Yeah. So there's a thing called FARA, right? It restricts the political activity of organizations acting as agents of foreign principles.
Yes.
Is that categorically distinct based on organizational identity?
I'm really not 100% sure. What I do know is that the First Amendment, because I'm grounding everything in the First Amendment, it doesn't discuss anything beyond freedom of speech. It shall not be. So it's not. It doesn't specify who can't speak. It just says that we should allow speech. That's what I'm trying to say.
All right. Very good. We're going to go ahead and go to you now, Vigi, captain of Team Affirmative. Give us your opening, sir. I'll start it when you do.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with a quote from the case from the side that said that Citizens United that passed the case. If the First Amendment has any force, it prohibits Congress from fining, jailing, or the association of citizens for simply engaging in political speech. This assumes that corporations are associations of people. The ACLU, the NRA, the Sierra Club, these are genuine associations of people. People join them voluntarily to express shared political beliefs. General Electric, for example, is a publicly traded corporation whose shareholders invest for financial return. The idea of the Citizens United decision collapses this distinction, and so a shareholder who bought GE stock for a dividend is associating with any First Amendment decisions that GE decides to do when lobbying the government. Citizens United upheld the disclosure requirements for electioneering communications, but it also made corporate treasury money freely available for independent expenditures, 501c4s, or for independent expenditures, and then 501c4s, they can donate an unlimited amount of money to them, and then they don't have to disclose their donors. And then 501c4s can turn around and dump this money into super PACs. And then super PACs disclose their contributors, and it shows the 501c4, not the original corporation. A great example of how this can be abused is with like the Clinton Foundation, where they have their 501c4s, and corporations can dump a fuckload of money into that, and then the Clinton Foundation can funnel money into super PACs. Corporations and other associations, like the individuals who contributed to them, contribute to the discussion, the debate, and the dissemination of information and ideas. That is what the First Amendment seeks to foster. Under this framework that Kennedy has set up in the Citizens United decision, it allows for something like a U.S. subsidiary of a Chinese state-owned company that is also a supposed association of people to contribute to that discussion and debate. Its employees are American. Its shareholders are citizens. By the majority's logic, the redistricting the restricting of its political spending is discrimination based on its corporate identity, which Kennedy explicitly says we shouldn't do. So the underlying constitutional logic of this, of the Citizens United case, is in direct tension with FARA, which is why I brought it up during the cross-ex. The premise that we shouldn't restrict people's speech based off of organization says that we also shouldn't restrict the speech of foreign agents.
Okay. All right. So now we're going to go ahead and have, I guess, McGroofus. Groofus, you are cross-examining Vigi. Go ahead and start it on up. 3 minutes is on the clock.
Is the concern the spending gap itself, what the money gets spent on, or both?
Both.
So if a wealthy individual spending the same amount of money on the same message is a wealthy individual spending the same amount of money on the same message less of a concern?
No, I would personally say it's just as much of a concern as corporations doing so.
So the solution applies to anyone spending heavily on political messaging, right?
The solution would be to make elections entirely publicly funded. I don't know about my debate partners, my personal solution would be the proposed strategy of making it so we allocate a certain amount of tax dollars from each individual in order to fund political campaigns off of that.
Okay, so corporation, you don't want those people spending money, right? Just to confirm
I
on
don't want
politics.
corporation. Correct.
Okay, so the messages you want to restrict, is that broadcast advertising primarily?
I mean that's part of it. I mean, it doesn't really affect us much anymore because most people don't watch cable news. I mean, it's mostly gonna be like YouTube ads and stuff nowadays. But
Okay, what about a documentary distributed on streaming or cable?
I mean, outside of an election year, outside of that, not even outside of an election year, outside of that 30 to 60-day window, that was initially proposed for electioneering of what it used to be, but I see that as fine personally.
All right. Vigi, would you be fine with the government preventing the publication of a book?
Preventing, no. Delaying, yes.
So you're comfortable with the government having the power to do that then, just to clarify?
To delay the publication of a book because it falls within the 30 to 60-day window of an election, yes.
Even though that the government's own lawyer in the oral argument said that they could prohibit the publication of the book.
That was a misframing by the lawyer. They would be able to prohibit it during the publication of the book during that 30 to 60-day window. They wouldn't be able to prohibit it outside of that 30 to 60-day window.
All right. Radish?
Yep. Is that it?
Time's up.
Sorry.
Yes.
So I was just trying to get this ready for you real quick. We're going to go ahead and go to a you, Groofus, for your opening. Groofus actually has a sound bite that he wants me to play. I believe that the audience should be able to hear this. So I'm going to start the clock once I see the things start jumping. So
it's a 500-page book, and at the end it says, and so vote for X. The government could ban that. Take my hypothetical. It doesn't say at the outset. It runs here this is a discussion of the American political system, and at the end it says vote for X.
Yes, our position would be that the corporation could be required to use PAC funds rather than general treasury
And if
funds.
they didn't, you could ban it.
If they didn't, we could prohibit the publication of the book.
all right, continue.
So, what you just heard was the Deputy Solicitor General of the United States, the government's lawyer, telling Justice Alito that, yes, under the theory my opponents are here to defend today, the government could essentially ban a book. Not a TV ad, not a robocall, a book. His hedge was, we could, but we wouldn't. Kennedy's response from the bench was, so we're supposed to just trust you? I asked my opponent that question just a minute ago, and I got a pretty similar answer. But that's not a limiting principle. That's a promise, and constitutional rights, they don't run on those. Here's what the law my opponents want to restore actually did. McCain-Feingold made it a federal crime to fund any communication that mentioned a federal candidate reached 50,000 people in their district and aired within 30 days of a primary. Hit all three and you faced federal prosecution, unless you routed everything through a separate PAC. Under that logic, as you just heard, a book qualifies. But there's a second problem to that law that I don't think anyone on the affirmative really wants to discuss. Incumbents already hold several structural advantages in American politics. Name recognition, free mail, established donor networks, media coverage for simply doing their jobs, official social media accounts. Challengers have one tool to close that gap: outside spending. McCain-Feingold took that away. It didn't reform campaign finance. It entrenched those who were already in power and called it reform. So my opponents are asking you to restore a law that the government admitted could basically ban books and systemically protected incumbents from electoral competition. Justice Scalia called the logic my opponents are defending today Orwellian. A government deciding which associations of citizens are permitted to speak about candidates and which aren't. 15 years later, they are still defending it.
Okay. All right. Good stuff. So this brings it back around to you doing the cross-examination here, Testes. 3 minutes is on the clock. Have at.
Sure. I don't know where the best place to start is here. So is there a precedent for book banning? I think just to preface this, my opponent, my teammate, he mentioned that this was essentially a misspeak, and that the looming threat seems to be, well, we could do it, but we're not going to do it. So is there a precedent of these things happening before, or is this just sort of like an interpreted or as a threat that you would say?
I mean, it's more of a threat, but once again, going to go back to what Kennedy said in the oral arguments, and I more so asked, why should we just trust the government that they won't use the book? There was a time when the U.S. government never had conscription, they never had income tax, they never had, antitrust laws. Are we saying that because those would never had?
I mean, sure.
Those never had precedent doesn't mean that the government won't start doing it.
I mean, I'll agree that things don't exist until they exist. Absolutely. I mean, that certainly seems to be.
Existence exists.
Yes, yes. Just to pivot a little bit, because this seems to be, I guess, the way that this is framed. I guess just to ask you, do you think that a large sum of money in politics is? Do you think it's good, bad, or just neutral? I know it's intentionally vague. I just want to kind of gauge where you're at.
I would say money in politics is an amoral thing. You have people who are going to be using it for nefarious purposes, people using it for what they believe are good purposes, right? So you're going to have I think, like I said, that question's a bit vague, but
It
I would
is
say
vague.
mostly
Sure,
amoral.
I'll drill down a little bit. Do you think that money influences elections?
Yes, it can
Okay.
influence. I would say it can influence elections. Add that qualifier, but yes,
Sure. I mean, I'll point
eventually.
out that. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the stat that the candidate that spends the most, uh, like vast majority of the time within the night. There's a couple outliers, but like we could say 95%. I don't have the exact number. Tend to win their elections, right?
Well,
I'm
sure,
just
but how much of those are incumbents?
right, and this is kind
Like
of a no, no.
Hillary
No.
Clinton
Fair
lost,
enough.
and
I'm
she
yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
outspent
Oh, so
Trump 3-1.
sure, yeah, and I'll even bite the bullet and say, you mentioned some things like these are public figures. They have name recognition, social media. It's not like they're just taking Joe Blow down at the corner stop or whatever and just making him into some political like titan, right? Just by pumping money into his election.
Hmm.
I mean, I guess since we've agreed that that money can at least influence elections, and I say you claim it's immoral, just figure wise, do you know how much money was or sorry, I'm almost out of time here, but do you know
Yeah,
how much
sorry.
money was spent from outside spending? So this would include individual as well as corporate money in the 2008 election, which would have been the last federal election before pre-Citizens United. If you just had to
Let's
take
see. Precinct,
a guess.
143 million
So the number I have here is 574 million. Um,
for. Wait, so we're saying 2008, correct? Or
2008, yeah, and this is outside spending. So
oh
as I
wait,
mentioned, this. Oh, sorry,
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
my source, my notes are showing about 143.
Okay, sure. That and I did combine corporate as well as individual, so mine might be combined. But just to land the plane here, since I'm out of time, I would just like to kind of point out that that number increased to 1.3 billion in 2012. So this would have been the first election after the ruling, and then in 2020, or sorry, in 2024, it was 4.5 billion. So, especially 2020 and 2024, there was a 3 to 4 fold increase in spending, and the majority of this money did come through super PACs. But completely out of time, so I'll leave it there.
All right. If there wasn't really a question there, did you have a response to that, though, Rufus?
Yeah, I mean, just I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. Like I said earlier, that's amoral. I didn't say
Sure.
that's immoral.
All right. Fair enough. All right, so we are now going to get into the champion rounds. And what that means is all of the debaters who have not yet faced each other are going to have 10 minutes put on the clock. They're going to go to the cage in the center of the ring, and they're going to politely duke it out. So, with that said, we're going to go ahead and go in sort of a reverse order here. Y'all don't even know who's going against who, but Testes, you're going to go ahead and roll right on in with Chuck. So, you guys have 10 minutes on the clock. Just kind of pick it up where you left off. This is a conversation. Go ahead, gentlemen.
Sure. Were you? I don't mean this to sound crass, but were you the person who was primarily like the free speech angle? Is that correct?
Yeah, you can say that.
Sure. So, I guess just to ask you, because if I guess freedom of speech is being limited in this regard, um, so apart from, I know this is a very specific case here. It was in regards to a documentary about Hillary Clinton, and I believe it was because it violated. It was within the 30 days of the primaries starting. So aside from that kind of specific sliver, what quote unquote free speech was limited prior to this ruling? Or I guess what changes? Like what was the overarching effect on free speech for corporations that changed?
Well, so I think that the arbitrary enforcement of free speech is empowering the government to go after people and empowering incumbents. So, like, for example, Citizens United, they originally were objecting to Michael Moore. I believe it was Fahrenheit 9/11. But Michael Moore was considered a legitimate media organization. And so Michael Moore was allowed to release his film. I believe it was released within the windows. And during the time, those windows, the 30 days or I believe 60 days, it depends of a primary. There's like two different numbers, but let's call it the 30-day window. In that 30-day window, that is prime speech time. That is political speech. That is what it is for. Freedom of speech is not meant to just like talk randomly, whisper in the corner. It's meant to talk and address political issues. And restricting it in that 30-day window is a problem, and arbitrarily restricting it. So, for example, as I said with Michael Moore, but then also other companies have had to do things like, for example, the NRA, they purposely made at the time they made it, it became legitimate. They made a fake media organization so that they could advocate during those windows. And then other companies, for example, like the New York Times, or what is considered a legitimate media organization that has been a legitimate organization for hundreds of years or however long the New York Times has been around, those companies are considered legitimate organizations, and we're entrenching monopoly power. We're entrenching
Right. So
these things.
if I could get in here, so
Yeah.
I guess because there was a lot there that you laid out. So just to kind of clarify, I guess off the top, would you draw a distinction between a news organization, so like journalism, versus a corporation, whether that be for profit or nonprofit? Would you draw a distinction between those two entities?
Is the news organization incorporated?
I'm not quite sure the relevancy, or like what the implication
use
may
an
be.
example of a news organization for me, if you don't mind.
Sir, well, you brought up the New York Times. Let's go with the New York Times.
So the New York Times is a corporation, so I don't see a difference between the two.
Okay, so you don't. So just because they sort of tag on that our our product is journalism, you don't believe, or I guess I don't want to seem like I'm being I'm obfuscating here. So just to kind of lay it out, I guess on the line here, because this is one of the things that Kennedy brought up in his decision, where he was saying he compared the New York Times, specifically Fox News and the New York Times. He compared them to ExxonMobil, and I mean so it sounds like you're saying that there's no, I guess, functional difference between those two types of entities. Would you I guess would you agree that there is value in a free press, or value in having journalism conform or be required different requirements than other corporate entities?
No, because I think that impacts something like, for example, like a citizen journalist. Now I know today, for example, there's a lot of people who they have to form like their own LLCs and everything. A lot of it's a lot of it is kind of like a legal requirement or a custom. Like you can't get a bank account unless you have an EIN number, for example, which requires getting an LLC or something of that nature. I mean, you can at some point do it, but that would impact, for example, like a citizen journalist, where back in the day, like the times of like Thomas Paine or Benjamin Franklin or something like that, they didn't have to incorporate to be a journalist. Not that I'm necessarily arguing that they are, but
Right.
it was a
Sure.
different time then. Today, almost
Okay.
everybody's incorporated.
All right, that's fine. I'll just note for like kind of the record here that I would disagree. I think that there is a reason why journalism is treated sort of differently from, I guess, a citizen journalist, which can apply in certain circumstances. But in terms of access, in terms of protecting anonymous sources, things like that, I would say the function of that entity defines sort of how they're treated. I would also say that this is reflected legally.
Does that hinge on whether they're a corporation or not, though? Or
It
does that
sounds like in
hinge
this.
on what they do?
So I don't know the exact, like, I guess, legal process of being registered as a journalistic organization. But I mean it's fine. We can kind of move on from that, because it sounds like we just disagree, which is fine.
Yeah.
So one of the things you keep mentioning is how this was arbitrary. So
Yes.
right. So um I guess in the application of the law, I don't remember the exact terminology here. It's strict structure or strict something, but would you at least agree that this decision had overturned previous rulings and set a legal precedent for future events?
It definitely overturned previous rulings. I believe that's why they had a second hearing,
Sure.
specifically because of that.
Okay.
And what was the second
So,
part of your question?
I don't recall off the top of my head. That's totally fine. I'm just kind of going from A to B here. So I guess what I would argue is I would say that this ruling was overly broad because I think as we discussed, I mean, even in your Michael Moore example, or let's take it the case as it was for this Hillary example, they could have ruled in the narrowest possible scope, and they could have said, okay, for this particular organization or for this particular film, they could have made a decision on that. Instead, what they did was they opened up the floodgates, so to speak. And previously, they had this nonprofit structure that existed. Now it's even for-profit structures. So they completely the implications of this was far-reaching. So I would say that the ruling itself was at the very least extremely broad in terms of its implications and its application. And I would just look to the dissenting opinion by Stevens and signed by others that would kind of support this.
Yeah, well, I would counter that by saying that the only reason that this was not a narrow decision is because the government itself said that they could ban a book, hence the clip that we heard. And then later on, in the second hearing, I believe it was Kagan was representing the government at the time. She stood behind that. She tried to go to explain it away, but she still stood behind that statement, wouldn't take it back, that they could ban books and things of that nature. So I think it's the government kind of let the cat out of the bag. They told people what they were going to do or what they could do if you didn't do what they wanted, and therefore the Supreme Court had to meet and broaden the issue. I think the federal government caused it to be broad, not that not that the Supreme Court decided to make it broad. I think that was a mistake on the government's part, and I believe
I mean,
in the law itself.
that's fine. I'll just also mention though that this is, I guess, hinging on a potential fear, and I understand where maybe that implication came from. Whether or not, according to Vigi, it was like sort of a clumsy phrasing, although you said it was kind of backed up. Um, this, didn't ultimately sort of come to pass.
Well, it's not kind of backed up. I mean, it was argued a second time, and the government stood by its original statements.
Right. Sure. So, how much time do we have here? Just want to make sure I got time. Okay, we still got a minute. So I guess just the final thing to kind of settle on here. Would you agree that corporations aren't people? And then what I mean by that, because I understand that that's a bit of a buzz term that's been thrown out a lot. Would you agree that they should not be treated as individuals just because of how they exist? There are certain either benefits that they get that people don't have. So I guess, would you support treating corporations as like a one-to-one to a person, or do you sort of agree that they are separate entities and shouldn't be treated exactly as people?
So we'll take that in two parts. Legally speaking, corporations are not people. They are associations of people tied together with loose contract law. Now, this contract law and natural personhood is not the exact same thing, or legal personhood and natural personhood are not the same thing. The government, they have they have set forth legal parameters, and they also have different types of restrictions. So what I mean by that is, like, for example, and I know the time's getting a little over, but what I mean is that I can say that they are not the same thing as people is because they don't have Fifth Amendment rights. So if the federal government shows up to, for example, the FBI walks in the door at a company and says, "We need all your documentation," they can't say, "Hey, this is self-incriminating,"
Sure.
and
I know where.
refuse to send
Go
it
ahead.
out there. So I mean,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that the government's already made clear that they are separate, and this decision did not change that.
Go ahead if you have a final
Sure.
thought there, Testes.
Yeah, I do, and I'm glad that you sort of recognize that as well. And I would say that this would help support my case. I guess what undercuts the First Amendment argument is that legally speaking, and this has been backed up constitutionally as well through these various cases, that because corporations are not people, they are not treated as such. And so this broad arcing like freedom of speech aspect, there have been tons of restrictions that have been placed on corporations because we do recognize they don't have the ability to vote. They have the ability to, again, pool these resources in ways that others aren't able to. They are, functionally immortal in terms of like they could exist forever. And so, various factors that go into it. I would just say that this is one of the reasons why it's a good thing, and it sounds like my opponent agrees that they are not treated as people, and as such, I don't think that it's a simple, arbitrary First Amendment sort of government overreach type of thing.
All right. Good stuff. Great conversation there, gentlemen. All right, we're going to roll that straight into our next champions fight. That is going to be Vigilante and Castle. 10 minutes is on the clock for you, gentlemen. You can pick up where they left off, go a completely different direction. It's entirely up to you. Keep it civil and get it on.
Yeah, so Vigi, I would say to you that a lot of what your side and what you have also stated has been around dark money or anonymity between donors. How does that change anything if this is overturned? What give me like the first benefit or top two benefits if Citizens United is overturned, and how that would differ from money influencing politics today?
Yeah, actually, I was going to save this to pull it up during my closing, but if Radish wants to pull up the two charts that I just sent him in his DMs and show them on screen, we could do that. I'll also post them in here.
Yeah, that's going to be...
So
it's going to be a little tricky for me just because it's not a source. It's like I was saying last night. If it's a website, I can pull it up. But if it's just a picture, I'm not set up for that. I'm sorry. But if you can put it up in your camera of your video feed. So basically, put it into your virtual cam. And I'll stop the clock. I'll actually go ahead and roll that back, put 9.5 minutes back on there for you guys for the technical time. Sorry about that.
Media link. Image link. Okay. Sorry, give me a second on this one. Let me pull this down here.
Thank you for your patience on this, everybody.
Okay, so I'm just going to change
You know what?
camera.
Ceasefire. I want the source for that.
By the way,
it's two separate sources, but yeah, I can.
Horseradish. One thing to note is that if something is a web source and you can put it into OBS that way, well, I guess, were you planning on sharing your screen?
No.
Or were you planning on bringing it up in a source in OBS?
Neither. Yeah, in a source in OBS. I already have it set up to be able to pull up websites. Okay. So, but yeah.
So what you can do is you can take the web source. There's an option in the properties there that says local file, and then you can just point it to the image file. It'll still work.
Copy that. We'll tell me that next time. All right, as you were, gentlemen.
There's that source for that one.
Control and roll.
Source for the other one.
So we can see.
The other source for the other one. Oh, wait, Internet Archive. That's so. There it is. The source for the other one is this. They are both by the same person, funny enough, actually. But
all right.
Now that I've got this pulled up, there's both of your sources, Griffiths. So this is from. By the way, specifically, this one is on page 10 of the first source.
Starting the clock.
Okay, so this is a graph showing the effectiveness of the different economic brackets at getting legislation passed based off of the favorability of that policy on of that policy among the people of that income bracket. So as we can see, obviously the rich definitely have a higher chance of getting that passed, but it's not too much of a difference, right? This is what that looked like after Citizens United was passed. The average citizen likelihood of getting an economic policy passed in general is now a flat 20%, while the popularity of the policy between economic elites now significantly goes up as it becomes more popular with those economic elites, as well as with special interest groups. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so you're saying that rich people will still have more influence over politics either way.
They'll still have a slight advantage, yes. However, the average person will actually have a voice in politics as opposed to having a flat neutral voice in politics like it does now.
So you think that this is more about individual donations? I mean, if you think about lobbying too, the lobbying has gotten worse. That's not going to be affected by Citizens United.
Um, uh, I mean, to a degree, it wouldn't, because of the way that lobbying works. The primary thing that it would affect is the funding for 501c4s, as well as it would get rid of super PACs. Because the basis that for the case that is the basis for allowing super PACs was based on Citizens United.
But you could also argue that now people themselves can pool their money together like a nonprofit organization, maybe a progressive nonprofit organization filled with a lot of small donations can actually compete now rather than beforehand against larger corporations. So isn't that kind of an argument for the fact that they're able to now kind of be more equal in that regard,
We've
whereas
already
before they couldn't have been?
we've already seen how that goes. It doesn't work. Look at the Justice Democrats and look at Progressive Victory. It doesn't work.
So then why do they tout small donations? Why was Bernie Sanders such a big proponent of it if it doesn't work?
You can get a select few people elected based off of grassroots policies, grassroots funding, specifically in bigger areas like New York City, uh, like Florence, Kentucky, or not Florence, yeah, like the Florence Newport area of Kentucky with Thomas Massey. Uh, but like generally speaking, in especially like lower income areas, or like more rural areas, you kind of have to have that that the money political reach to get your message out there, because it's a lot harder for those larger districts where it is mostly land for for the candidates to actually do on the ground real political work.
So I would
Because the
actually
way
push
that
back on that a little bit because politically speaking, I would say today compared to 20 years ago, we have a lot more people in Congress who are considered populist or grassroots funded candidates. I mean, even Donald Trump, like we talked about the election, Hillary Clinton outspent him
no, it's not.
3-1 in the election, and he still beat her. And so, would you say that Congress today is less representative of the people than it was 20 years ago when there were more neoconservatives, more moderate centrist liberals, Clintonites? I mean, AOC, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, like I would feel like a lot of those people were elected from small roots donations and local,
The only
races compared to.
there's only one Republican in Congress, by the way, that as far as I'm aware, you can fact check me on this, and I will admit that I'm wrong. The only Republican in Congress that is currently been elected that ran a grassroots funded campaign is Thomas Massey.
Okay, so on the Republican side, as far as you know, it's just one person. At least on the Democrat side, there are multiple
It's
people.
like on the Democrat side, it's like 10 to 15 out of over, it's like 400 people in Congress,
Yeah,
425 people in
but
Congress.
compared to how many
Literally
in
nothing.
2004? I mean, I couldn't name a single one 20 years ago that represented people closer to what we have now, at least on the Democrat side. So I think that's kind of showcasing that small money does have an impact a lot more than it ever has, and it's still an important piece. Otherwise, I don't think Democrats would start to shy away from PACs, right? We've seen Democrats who run for office say they don't take PAC money anymore, and they still win. So that's actually become a benefit to them, politically speaking. Would you argue it? Would you agree with that?
I mean, the whole reason why that's a benefit is because before, when it was happening before, there wasn't this massive amount of corporate funding coming from super PACs and 501c4s. That was to where it was actually a problem. One of the biggest complaints you'll see from people in general today on like why they don't trust Congress is because they believe Congress is corrupt because of Citizens United, because of the ability for 501c4s to funnel infinite dark money into politics, and for super PACs to be able to funnel infinite money into our politics.
Yeah, but I always think that's kind of misleading. People do disapprove of Congress, but if you look at the approval rates of their specific congressperson, they're usually much higher or much more favorable, to the point where it's kind of ironic that they view Congress so poorly because they love their individual congressperson. But one of the things that you mentioned too was about the dark money piece. And again, that's something that people have already been able to do that before. Political advocacy existed long before that. And I think it's
Individuals,
kind of
you're partially
right.
correct. Individuals were allowed to do that before. What Citizens
Right.
United did was allow for corporations and associations of people to donate massive amounts of money into those 501c4
Yeah, so like your
organizations.
argument is just saying that individuals can still do it, but corporations can't if this is overturned. But that doesn't solve the problem of dark money.
Yeah, because this is step one to fixing the problem. Step one is getting rid of the Citizens United decision. Step two is banning dark money in politics in general.
Right, but you could do that with Congress today if they passed a law. It doesn't
No, you can't.
necessarily have.
No,
Yes,
you
you could.
can't because you cannot because of the ruling of Citizens United.
Wait, so you think that we can't amend the Constitution? We couldn't change the way that we write
You could amend.
existing law
You could
today?
amend the You could amend the Constitution, which is an entirely different process. But Congress cannot pass a law to limit that spending because of the Citizens United decision. Those
Okay,
are two
so you can
completely
do.
different processes.
Okay, but you said we couldn't do it at all. Or were you just
No, I
saying
said
through
Congress
Congress we
can
couldn't
do
through
it.
it? Okay,
I was
sorry,
saying
then I
through
misheard.
Congress we could do it.
Okay, so there is a way that Congress could amend the Constitution. You just don't think that Congress can do it through law. That's what you're saying.
They can't pass a law to ban dark money. We could do a constitutional convention and do it that way, but that is a significantly harder process to get done.
But Congress has already passed limitations before, like the individual amounts that people can donate. So they can regulate it in some way if they can't overturn or use a constitutional
So,
amendment, right?
according to the Citizens United decision, corporations and collections of people are allowed to spend unlimited money in the political environment, even to 501c4s. This being the case, Congress passing a law to limit that amount of money would immediately be overturned by the Republican Supreme Court because they've already decided on it when they decided on Citizens United.
All
Or
right.
do we have extra time?
Yeah, no, if you want, I was going to let you respond to that if you wanted to, but
Yeah, I was just going to say one thing. Like, my last point about that is you brought up the Republican Supreme Court. Well, how are you going to overturn it?
By expanding the courts. That's one of the first things we're going to have to do. Or alternatively set term limits on the court and term limit out the people like Justice Thomas.
all right.
Okay. I say good luck to that.
All right. Good job, gentlemen. Thank you very much, both of you. So now we're going to go ahead and get to our last set of debaters. Nope. Wrong one. That's the one. All right. Ancom, Psycom, and Groofus. I'm putting 10 minutes on the clock for the two of you. Get in there.
The ANCAP versus the ANCOM. It was
Weird
always
that
going
it-
to come down to this.
Weird that it came down to that.
Yeah, again.
Weird, you say? Yeah, no, that was
No, it's not
intentional
weird.
on Meg's side.
Yeah.
All right,
maybe it was
Griffiths,
kind
what
of
you got for me?
intentional, But so would you say that the modern dark money infrastructure started to take shape before or after Citizens United in relation specifically to corporations?
I would say before, I would just say Citizens United was effectively one of the larger nails in the coffin that got us where we are today. It was a significant step forward in the corporate dark money, journey that we've taken over the last century.
Right. So, Karl Rove was already incorporating Crossroads GPS, one of the biggest dark money groups vehicles in Republican politics, 4 months before Citizens United came down. The infrastructure was already built.
Okay.
Right. So, my point is, this whole thing of dark money isn't actually, so to speak, isn't a thing. It's, I guess, I believe Chuck said earlier, it's an IRS issue. It's an enforcement
Well,
issue.
you can say that, but the thing is, Crossroads GPS filed as a 501c4 in September 2009, which was the same month as the arguments that were given. Oftentimes,
Re-arguments.
you can. I'm sorry?
It was the re-arguments, not the initial arguments, but yeah.
Yes, but still, it was the argumentation that ultimately led to the decision. You can often tell how a court is likely going to decide based on their reaction during those arguments, can't you?
To a point, you can, but I would say maybe you could have predicted they were going to side with Citizens United insofar as the first part, but I mean, I don't know if you can necessarily fully predict that they were going to strike down parts of McConnell and Austin.
I mean, given that they had literally set the re-arguments in order to specifically look at McConnell v. Austin, because originally it was just Citizens United, but then that bit about the book banning came up in argumentation, and they were like, shit, we need to expand this. And so the Supreme Court expanded it and said, let's do re-argumentation in 6 months, and lo and behold, when they did that re-argumentation, the justices were fairly clear in their reactions to what the government and Citizens United's arguments were, and it was fairly clear from the outside, especially for an experienced political operative like Karl Rove, to see the writing on the wall and to create Crossroads GPS in anticipation and reaction to the decision, to the argumentation and the decision. So, you can't just say that he did it before that. All of these things were going on at the same time, and experienced political actors like Karl Rove and his ilk could see where this was going. It's not difficult to predict that.
So, the dark money infrastructure was being built under the existing campaign finance law before Citizens United changed anything in anticipation for a ruling that hadn't happened yet. That means the problem you're describing existed independently of the decision, though. They still would have been able to do it.
Again, you can say that, but just because something happened before something else, if the latter item was predictable, and I believe this was to a fairly high extent, then you can still say that the prediction of the later act can influence the execution of the former act. And guess what would have happened if the decision didn't come down in the way that it had? He had created a 501c4 that he could quickly and easily dissolve. No mess, no foul, I think is the how the saying goes. Like, this was not a big lift for him to do. It was a low risk, high reward action to be like, oh, hey, it might go this way. Let's prep for that. Like, this is not difficult to see.
So I mean, I know for me it just kind of seems like they filed the same month before the ruling, before they knew the outcome. Maybe this is just going to be where we kind of end up at a not crossroads. I guess I forget the word, but Rove was incorporating a dark money vehicle while the case was still being argued. It's not necessarily anticipation. It's more of, I would call it a bet. The entire dark side.
I mean, what?
Yeah,
Putting money on in anticipation, like that's what a wager is. You expect something to happen a certain way, so you put money on it because if it goes that way, it will benefit you. And in this case, forming Crossroads GPS was a fairly low risk, a low risk bet because, like, again, he could just dissolve it and move on if it didn't work. This was literally a, I see an opportunity coming. Maybe I should hedge, or maybe I should do something to take advantage of it in case it goes my way. And if it doesn't go my way, I'll find another path. It's no big deal. Like, you can't tell me that political operatives aren't extremely experienced at predicting the waxing and waning of Washington politics, especially as it relates to the Supreme Court, knowing the makeup of the court, knowing the bents of the various justices on the court, and knowing the details of the case. Like, all of the briefs and everything were public knowledge. If you are spending time going through that before oral arguments even have to happen, like all of these briefs get submitted to the court beforehand and become public knowledge, you can fairly accurately predict which way the court's gonna go.
Okay, but if he dissolved it, we wouldn't be talking about it. He didn't dissolve it.
Yeah.
But more importantly, the fact
because
that he was willing to build it before the ruling tells you the 401c structure was already attractive enough to be worth the bet. The dark money problem isn't the product of Citizens United. It's a product of the IRS rules that made anonymous political spending throughout nonprofits viable before 2010. Citizens United is a red herring.
No, but the thing is, it's not, because Citizens United specifically overrode the MCFL exemption, the one that required 501c4s to not be corporate, or to not have corporate or union donors. That was the specific exemption that MCFL put into place that Citizens United then removed, which meant that this 501c4 exemption that you keep penning on the IRS is related to a previous court ruling that then got overturned. So you are misstating the cause by excluding the relevant history of the case.
Right. Citizens United didn't entirely overruled MCFL, though. It made it irrelevant by removing the underlying restriction entirely. But once again, more importantly, that case was already a pathway for nonprofit political spending before Citizens United. The dark money infrastructure didn't require Citizens United to function, required 501c4 status, which predates all of this. Citizens United expanded who could use the pathway, but not the pathway that existed was known and was being used. Once again,
but the thing about the exemption
an IRS problem.
But the thing about the exemption, in 2003, when MCFL was decided, at that point, 501c4s couldn't do independent expenditures for political causes. MCFL allowed that specifically for corporations that were ideologically motivated, rather than motivated on profit, that did not have shareholders and that did not have corporate donations. Citizens United removed that entire suite of exceptions and said, okay, you can just go ahead and do that now. It allowed 501c4s to do the political expenditure that they were previously prevented from with the exemptions given in MCFL. By wiping out those criteria, as Citizens United did, it opened the floodgates for every goddamn 501c4 in the whole fucking world to make as many political donations as they wanted. It was building on top of the already existing IRS rules on donations to 501c4s. I don't disagree there. But you have to understand that, like, the damn opening was Citizens United. It wasn't the IRS rules.
Okay, so the NRA, for example, neither of us particularly here for the NRA, but the NRA was already building corporate media structures, for example, specifically to get around existing restrictions before Citizens United. If the pre-CU rules were so effective at blocking dark money and corporate influence, why were major media or major organizations that weren't really media organizations already engineering workarounds? The pathway existed. People were just finding creative ways to use it. Citizens United didn't create the incentive to route money around campaign finance, although incentive was already there and people were
just made it
acting
easy.
on it already.
Of course the incentive was there. The incentive is always there to find ways around rules to increase your influence. Citizens United didn't create the incentive.
problem
It
then.
just opened what?
So it didn't create the problem then.
Of course it did. The incentive is always there. Whether or not that incentive can be executed is the problem. There are incentives.
So we
for
need
all
more disclosure
sorts of
requirements.
things. Say again?
I said we need more disclosure requirements. We needed to pass the disclosure
Yes,
act, right?
that is. I mean, that would be one way to do it, but overturning Citizens United would also be a good way to do that. You could do this either way. We're arguing for this particular way because it's the one that is, or that the prompt wants. Like, whether or not the Disclosure Act even can pass is an untested question at this point, which is actually why when Check and Money brought it up, I asked who was what party was the primary sponsor of it, because I would be willing to bet at least some small amount of money that it was a Democrat, and that in the current congressional makeup, it's probably not even going to get to the floor, or it's probably going to die in committee. Now, if you can refute that, fine, but we're talking about possible solutions. Sure, what you have one possible solution, it doesn't invalidate the other. There are multiple ways to skin a pig, as the saying goes. I don't know if it's a pig, but it doesn't matter. The point is that this will do the job just as well as the Disclosure Act, if not better, because Citizens United had such wide-reaching implications. Yes, we want more disclosure in terms of who the donors to 501c4s are. We want more disclosure to know who is injecting money into our politics and for what purpose. I do also think that the electioneering rules about, doing specific, like, targeted advertising for specific candidates outside of those candidates' campaigns should also be upheld, because I do agree, or I do believe that having massive amounts of money pouring into our election system does have a significant corrupting influence, as I think Vigilante demonstrated very clearly with the graphs that he pulled up. But I also think that no matter how much disclosure you have, more disclosure is better. So let's do it this way. Let's agree. Do both. Overturn Citizens United and pass the Disclosure Act. There's nothing that says you can't do both of these things.
Can I add some little context before?
I'll give you the last thought there.
Okay, so the Disclosure Act was first introduced by a Democrat in June of 2010, 5 months after Citizens United. It passed the House 219 to 206, but was defeated by the Republican filibuster, failing to get 60 votes. Senate and House Democrats have reintroduced it every subsequent Congress since.
Oh, okay. So what you're saying is the Democrats saw this, saw the decision, tried to put something in place to fix it, and had been blocked by Republicans ever since. Curious.
All right, cool. So
I just want to say really quickly, I'm not claiming the Republicans are anti. angels in this.
All right. Yeah, I don't think anybody claims either of the political parties are angels. So we're going to go ahead. I'm going to remind you guys, chat, if you think that there is any questions that you got that got left on the table, remember, click that link that's pinned in the chat. Throw a couple bucks in the jar. You can throw a question at them. We're going to do the questions after their closings. I'm going to go back through each of the debaters now, and we are going to go in the same order that you went originally. Testicle Johnson, you were the one who got to go first, so you're also going to start us off here. 3 minutes is on the clock for closing arguments. Go ahead and start when you're ready.
All right. So I don't have anything written down, which is a risky play for a closing, because I feel like there's a lot that was discussed, and I'm just going to kind of go stream of consciousness, and I just get some things out that unfortunately I feel like either weren't addressed or were perhaps skimmed over. Maybe I'll start from sort of, I guess, a little bit what's on my mind because it was last discussed. So this talk of the Disclosure Act, and then with Castle talking to Vigi, there was some talks of a constitutional amendment. I feel like if that's what we're saying, if that's what we're saying, there's some implicit admission that this is a problem. Otherwise, why would you need an act or a constitutional amendment if it, which is an extreme measure, and constitutional amendment is a pipe dream. But it seems like there's at least an admission that there is something happening here that we don't like. So this leads into something like transparency, right? So in this, the Citizens United versus FEC, one of, I guess, from the decision from Kennedy, see if I can find the exact line. It was about it was specifically about transparency and corruption, and it's long been held that either corruption or the appearance of corruption are, I guess, equally as bad, if you will. So something to consider. Sorry. Yeah. So with this, I guess, just kind of tying things together, I guess when we talk about the floodgates opening, because we have admitted that individuals and corporate donations could have utilized these levers in the past. I think the chart that Vigi brought up was a great one because it highlights that this has had an effect on US politics, and there is a direct correlation, at least I would claim there is one, between the amount of money that's been spent here and the subsequent policy issues. I did have a note here. It was from the New York Times. It said that one billionaire. Sorry, let me just find this here. So this is from the New York Times that I guess how much billionaires have contributed. And I understand billionaires aren't corporations, but it's a little bit of a bait and switch, right? Billionaires own businesses through corporate funding of how they make their wealth. So billionaires made up 19% of all reported federal campaign contributions in 2024. So I'm not just saying that money is bad, right? Money has an impact. The other thing to address here is I guess the free speech angle. And this is not a free speech case. Their speech was not limited except in the very narrow scope of the 30 days for the primaries or 60 days, I believe, for the general election or for elections. And so you have to sort of ask, why were these things in place in the first place? Because it was deemed constitutional, and even my opponents have agreed that with this ruling, there was overturning of previous precedent, because they recognized that corruption, that this undue influence from these actors does influence things in a negative way. So the sort of general principle about running attack ads within the 30 to 60 is that they couldn't say, okay, well, we want you to vote for this candidate. That's still prohibited, right? But they could say, well, I heard that this guy likes to hit children. Would you vote for someone like that? I mean, we have all seen these sort of what I would refer to as disgusting attack ads that get run every election cycle, right? So that in isolation, I think, is fine. But when those things are so close in a run up to election, and when those things, you can be inundated with those things constantly, I think that there's an admission, again, that these things do have an impact and do have a sway. One of the things I didn't quite get into, I guess on its face, it seems like an innocent fact, like the politician or the campaign that spends the most. And in some cases, I even cited this, that in the last campaign cycle, 126 campaigns, they actually raised more money through super PACs than through their own campaign funding. So if that doesn't tell you that corporate interests have an extreme vested interest in the outcomes of these elections, I don't know what does. And I think we've already highlighted that combined with lobbyists and getting their interests passed, they say, well, these things are independent. We can't communicate with one another. I think we all know that's bullshit. I think the reason, I know it may come off a little conspiratorial as in the end note, but I believe it was if I'm not mistaken, the head of Citizens United ended up becoming Trump's campaign manager. I think he temporarily stepped away from the organization specifically for that. So it's kind of like we all know what's going on, but we don't want to say it out loud. Yeah, I kind of do wish I wrote something down now. So a little bit all over the place, but that's my time, and I'll stick with it.
Cool. So my opponents, they spent a lot of time talking about the problems of money in politics, and we all can agree that money can create influence. But throughout the debate, they never clearly proved something much more important: that overturning Citizens United case would meaningfully remove the influence, rather than simply redirect it somewhere else at the expense of the First Amendment. In reality, it remains that wealthy political influence existed long before this case, and my opponents want transparency and corruption rooted out. But overturning Citizens United doesn't get rid of these completely, and we understood that when we went back and forth through our cross exams. In Testy's closing, he said free speech wasn't affected until 60 days before a general election or 30 days before a primary. But that's a huge exception that admits that free speech was still being restricted in some manner. So I think giving the government that type of influence over free speech is still harmful, even if it's through a very narrow scope. My opponents also never demonstrated how overturning this case suddenly prevents wealthy influence. Rather than simply shifting spending from corporations to billionaires, from nonprofits to lobbying firms, or from transparent expenditures into harder to track political activity. I mean, Vigi brought up that graph earlier when we were talking together, and there wasn't really any preventative way from just saying lobbyists can now spend that money, even more money than before, or a wealthy individual billionaire or two of them or three of them can just individually spend that money separately now rather than create some super PAC to do it. So that matters because all of this still is going to affect our constitutional rights, which should not be restricted just for some symbolic gesture. If overturning Citizens United does not actually solve the underlying problem, then what are we even doing? We are expanding just the government authority over political speech, while powerful interests are still retaining countless other avenues to influence politics. And that's not really a solution. That's just rearranging the same influence into different legal structures. And there are also other major issues that were never addressed. Even if you didn't personally dislike the outcome of Citizens United, overturning it still required the Supreme Court to fundamentally reinterpret the First Amendment and allow broader restrictions on independent political advocacy. So when we were talking about what happens if the Supreme Court were to overturn the case anyway, with a majority Republican, if you want to call it Supreme Court, that didn't even end there because Vigi would bring up, oh, well, then we can start banning dark money, and then we can start using Congress to pass laws on anonymity for political donations and all these other things. The list goes on because the fact remained that even once this was overturned, there's still a larger problem out there on how we're dealing with these things via regulation. So even if we overturned it and somehow this Republican conservative Supreme Court overturned it, it still wouldn't be fixing everything. So the opponents already admitted this is just one step into a process. And this first step that even has to happen from the Supreme Court is still something that's wildly, at least until the next generation isn't even possible based on the current makeup, and we still don't even know if Alito and Clarence Thomas are going to retire soon and then be replaced by even younger conservative court justices. So after all that, Congress would still need to draft entirely new laws to attempt to regulate political spending without violating free speech protections, without targeting certain viewpoints, without creating vague standards around electioneering communication, and that could easily just expand government control over political expression. So my opponents just treated this debate as though overturning Citizens United magically removes money from politics and cures everything, but it does not. At best, it changes the channels which money flows through. At worst, it empowers government to supply political advocacy while wealthy individuals and interests continue finding alternative paths around the restrictions anyway. And at the end of the day, the court was not deciding whether politics is perfect. It was deciding whether the government may suppress the independent political speech absent direct corruption. And if the answer becomes yes, if government may silence or restrict political advocacy simply because it may create influence, then free speech is no longer belongs equally to the people. I think that the other side would just have to admit that there are costs to free speech and that we should be able to do something about it. For people who believe in the First Amendment and the originalist interpretation, that's just simply not an option. It belongs to whoever government decides has spoken too loudly. I think free speech remains in the hands of the people. And I'll end it there.
All right. Well, I'm glad that I'm giving you guys 5 minutes each. It looks like that was the right decision because I think you all had plenty of points you wanted. It was a good debate. You want to get your thoughts out. So, Ancom, you are up next, sir. 5 minutes is on the clock. Use as much of it as you'd like. Go ahead and start up when you're ready.
All right. So today we've heard arguments claiming that Citizens United didn't do what we on the affirmative have confirmed that it actually did do, which is open the floodgates for money in politics to take an even larger role than it already had. My opponent Castle here is correct. Overturning Citizens United wouldn't fix everything. If that's a reason to do nothing, to let it stand, then we would never get anything done. He is bringing in the classic fallacy of allowing the perfect to be the enemy of the good. We are arguing that Citizens United should be overturned because it opened certain pathways that didn't exist before, at least in the same way, and allowed for a gigantic flood of untraceable money to now go into private political expenditure and override all of the previous concerns that the various court cases and laws that have been passed had for the corrupting influence of money in politics. No, it would not completely remove that. Yes, the wealthy and powerful will always find different ways to influence politics to their own advantage using the massive sums of money they have access to. All we are arguing for here is making sure that we are trying as much as we can to close those routes off as quickly and efficiently as possible to prevent the massive corrupting influence of that money in our politics. I do not believe in restricting free speech generally, but I do think that there is an interest in allowing regular people like you and me to not be overshouted by the billions of dollars that the top 1%, the top 10% of people and corporations in this country can funnel into political campaigns. The point of freedom of speech isn't that some people get more speech than others. The idea behind freedom of speech was to cancel out what was established by the British monarchy and aristocracy, which is the king and the aristocrats got their say over everyone else. The whole point of freedom of speech is to say, no, the king and the aristocrats can't prevent me from speaking against them, can't overshout me from being able to get my point across. The problem now is we have a new aristocracy, It's called an oligarchy. We have the wealthiest people in this country having ownership of the megaphones that we all listen to for all of the information we get. We're just trying to say, hey, can we tamp that down a little bit? Can we let the average citizen, you and me, have a little bit more say, allow our voices to be heard, talk to one another, rather than having someone constantly at a megaphone yelling at us what we should believe? I don't think that's too much to ask. I don't think that is a corruption or a violation of the fundamental nature and spirit of the First Amendment, of our ability to speak freely. I think it is addressing one of the biggest dangers of having free speech too widely, because if you can just shout over your opponents, then you have effectively abridged their speech. So, in sum, I think that our response here is the most reasonable response. It is the most voter and electorate centered response, rather than defending giant corporations and wealthy billionaires from being able to shout over everyone. We are saying, let's curtail that a bit so that the rest of us have room to speak. That's my argument.
All right. Great stuff. Chuck, you're up. 5 minutes going on the clock. Use as much of it as you need to. I'll start when you do.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to start by saying that the core issue of the Citizens United case is the free speech aspect. It was a narrow case. They could have dealt with that issue at hand, but the government decided to say that it could limit speech in an arbitrary way, and that was a major problem, specifically limiting speech at a time of importance in the political process, the window 30, 60 days before an election. Prime political speech. Political speech is what free speech is about. If you can't talk and bring your political leaders to account, there's nothing you can do. Now, I heard it mentioned that the New York Times said billionaires make up a certain amount of blah, blah, blah. Well, of course, the New York Times is going to be against Citizens United. Citizens United knocks down their monopoly power to control the media apparatus at the time of an election. They hate that. They want complete control, along with CNN, along with Fox News, along with any other media corporation that is trying to take advantage of people. This case is a free speech case. Now, we hear about corporate donations. We're worried about corporate donations. Well, big money was always able to get into the situation. They were always able to affect politics. We've heard everyone admit that big money always has been able to get into it. Small groups, though, now are able to get into it. I personally am part of a small PAC. We are a small group, and we have successfully gotten city council members across the country elected. We've gotten people in different areas elected. We've fought against corrupt government, providing support and aid where it's needed. We would not be able to do that without Citizens United. Would we max out the numbers? No. We're libertarians. We don't get big money. Libertarians are called the corporate shills, but we don't have the corporate money. I can tell you that. Now, when we're talking about limited speech, and I hear we're willing to limit speech because we want to limit the speech of rich people. Rich people's speech isn't getting limited. It's not going to happen. The speech is going to get limited are the people who cannot comply with the arbitrary rules and all the things that are put upon them. They're unable to support it. They're unable to do it. Let's get to the core issue of what the problem is. The core issue, and this is not the Citizens United case, mind you. I've already made my case of this free speech issue, that this is a problem. The core issue is the centralization of power, the omnipotent state, laws that enable legal plunder. This is a fundamental incentive that encourages people to petition their government, small, vocal minority groups to petition their government to try and take control and benefit from that government. We need to eliminate the power that the central government has. That is how you take care of this problem. You will never, ever crush corporate interests. You will never, ever stop people who want power unless the power is not there to gain. There's no ROI if you can't give them an ROI. And that's the fact of the matter. You know, arbitrary is despotic and deadly. I mean, we hear it all over the place. Legalistic arbitrariness without strong justice. Law becomes a weapon of the state and capitalists. Yes, I said it. It's a weapon of capitalists. You know, this legalistic arbitrariness is a major, major problem. Now, I'm going to use examples of what arbitrary power is. Michael Moore was allowed to put out his thing, Fahrenheit 9/11. Citizens United was denied. They also tried to stop Michael Moore. They were denied. The NRA used money and finance to manipulate the system and create a media organization. They were able to get through. The New York Times has forever been able to force politicians' endorsements and other things down our fucking necks. I apologize for that. And we can't do anything about it. It's been known that a small, vocal minority of activists will always defeat a large majority and take advantage of them. Michael Huemer, philosopher, Olson, Brian Kaplan, who has empirical data to back it up, books, The Rational Voter, and other things. This is a fact. Citizens United was fundamentally a free speech issue, but fundamentally the issue that everyone's complaining about is the centralization of power, arbitrary power of government, and the destruction of our liberties. Thank you.
All right. So next up is going to be Vigilante. Vigilante, 5 minutes is going on the clock. Use as much as you like. Start it when you do.
The opposition would like us to believe that this case had a net neutral effect on the people's ability to influence legislation. However, the studies by Martin Galens before and after Citizens United show that prior to the Citizens United, the rich had a slight advantage on getting policy passed, but based on how popular it was in their income bracket. However, the average citizen actually did have some influence on getting legislation passed. Whereas now, after Citizens United, where we've expanded the ability for corporations and big money donors to dump their billions of dollars into the pockets of PACs and 501c4s in order to lobby for legislation to get passed, then that amount of money that they're able to put in means that our voices no longer fucking matter. Money is not speech. It is the amplification of said speech. The more money you have, the more speech you get to have. Or so the system that Citizens United has amplified, put into place. The opposition is arguing from an absolutist fallacy, arguing that because overturning the decision wouldn't get rid of all of the issues, so we should not do anything at all. Yes, the fact is that this is a multi-stage process. You can't just outright ban dark money because of this case. Because of that, this is the first step in fixing the money and politics problem that is plaguing America today. They're also operating under the slippery slope fallacy with the First Amendment, under the idea that limiting some free speech for an association of people, aka for-profit corporations, will lead to the limitation of all associations of people. This assumes that associations of people move is an obfuscation. A corporation is not a group of people with a shared political goal. When a corporation goes and chooses to participate in politics, it's whoever is in charge that is the one making the decision on what they do with that money. There's a stark difference between this and groups such as the NAACP or the NRA, where these are explicitly membership organizations for the purpose of lobbying the government. The group that Chunkin Money was describing that he participates in would be a lot closer to the NAACP or the NRA, not a corporate PAC or a 501c4, where we're talking about the mass centralization, as he put it. But that centralization is external to the government because the PACs allow for all of these different small interests, smaller corporate interests, to aggregate their money to push for a similar agenda instead of them and also while having unlimited funds to do so, because they can dump all of their unlimited amount of funds into doing this. So this, so we should apparently continue to allow this to happen, because it apparently would not prevent smaller lobbying associations from having a voice when none of this is about smaller interests. It's all about the big interests, the corporate interests. The corporate interests are the problem. Nobody here has a problem with smaller groups, smaller associations of people being allowed to have a voice in politics. The problem stems from when we sit here and allow the large corporate donors to not just have their voice in politics, but have more of a voice in politics because they have more money than those of us with less money. I mean, that's the whole point of Citizens United, is it allows the people with more money to sit here and have a louder voice and push for the things that they want to get passed, despite the fact that their opinions are no more valid than anybody else's.
All right. Well, that means that it ends up in your hands to close here. 5 minutes on the clock, Rufus. You got your wish, man. Here's your chance.
Karl Rove was incorporating Crossroads GPS 4 months before Citizens United came down. The NRA was already building corporate media structures to root around existing rules before the decision existed. The infrastructure for dark money wasn't built by Citizens United, it was built around the rules my opponents want to restore. And here's what's telling about that. When Democrats in Congress decided to respond to Citizens United, they didn't introduce a bill to overturn it. They introduced the Disclose Act 5 months after the decision in 2010. It's been reintroduced every single Congress since, and requires any group spending over $10,000 in an election cycle to disclose donors for 24 hours. That's the solution their own caucus settled on, not reversal transparency. If overturning Citizens United were the answer to dark money, you'd expect the people most opposed to Citizens United to be pushing for reversal as a primary fix. Instead, they keep introducing this bill, because they know, even if they weren't here to say it today, that the dark money problem lives in the IRS governing 501c4s, rules that predate Citizens United, rules that overturn Citizens United leaves completely intact. On the First Amendment, my opponents argued that corporate spending restrictions don't violate the First Amendment because corporations aren't voluntary associations. General Electric shareholders, Vichy says, don't choose to associate the way ACLU members do. Addressing one of Vichy's points, shareholders buy stock voluntarily. They choose to associate their capital with that entity. By my own opponent's definition, DGE is a voluntary association. Its members just join through equity rather than a membership card. The distinction they're drawing isn't between voluntary and involuntary. It's between associations they like and the ones they don't like. It's not a principle, that's a preference. And he also called our argument a slippery slope in closing. I want to address that directly. A slippery slope is a prediction about future consequences. Argue X today and eventually Y will happen. That's not what we argued. We argued that the law my opponents want to restore as written already covered books. Not a future risk, not as a hypothetical, as the stated legal position of the United States government under direct questioning from the Supreme Court. Alito asked, Malcolm Stewart answered. Vigi also said that nobody here has a problem with smaller groups having a voice, just not corporations. Citizens United is a small group. It's a nonprofit with a few dozen employees that wanted to distribute a documentary. That's the corporation my opponents want to silence, not ExxonMobil, not Goldman Sachs, a small nonprofit advocacy group that made a political film. And they want to restore, and the law they want to restore made that a federal crime. So when my opponent says nobody had a problem with smaller groups having a voice, I'd ask him to square that with the law that criminalized exactly that. But also unions. In many states, union membership is a condition of employment. Workers are required to join and pay dues just to keep their jobs. By my own opponent's standard, voluntary associations, unions are less voluntary than general electric shareholders. If their argument is consistent, it restricts union speech more than political speech and more than corporate speech. On the empirics, Vigi showed you studies demonstrating the elite influence on policy outcomes. What I didn't see is any causal link to Citizens United. Correlation between wealth and political influence isn't evidence that the decision caused it. The study I didn't see anywhere mention CU. The authors I don't believe ever made that claim. Which brings me back around to the book. My opponents spent time arguing that the government's banning concession was overstated. There's a distinction between restricting speech during a window and banning it outright. A book criticizing a candidate cannot be published when it's politically relevant isn't a free book, it's a censored one. The entire point of political speech is to influence an election. The law that says you can speak, just not when it matters, isn't protecting speech. It's gutting it while technically leaving it alive. And more importantly, the distinction wasn't offered by the government's own lawyer when Alito asked him directly. It was principled and sufficient, but Stewart of the United States would have made it clear under direct questioning, but he didn't. He said yes, and when pressed on it, whether the government would use that power, his answer was we could, but we wouldn't. My opponents gave you a version of that answer today. Trust us, we wouldn't go that far. But here's what it actually comes down to. My opponents want to restore a law that their own government admitted could ban books. A law that protected incumbents from electoral competition while calling itself reform. A law that didn't prevent dark money. It gave political operatives the target to blame when infrastructure they'd already rejected built kept working. And what's here gets lost in the debate every time it happens. The First Amendment isn't just the right to speak, it's the right to listen. I personally want to hear what the Macy's Institute has to say. I imagine my opponent wants to hear what the ACLU has to say. And a struggling challenger running against a 30-year incumbent, someone with no name recognition, no franking privileges, no free media coverage, that challenger wants the right to be heard. McCain-Feingold didn't level the playing field, it locked the gates. Citizens United didn't destroy or corrupt American democracy, it returned a principle that the court established in 1976. And just remember, speech was not restricted, except in this really one important time right before elections.
All right. There we go. All right, so this is your last chance to get any questions in there. I'm going to go ahead and throw the link into the chat. You guys go ahead and click that link. I think it's going to everybody who's streaming, so I'm going to go ahead and throw it onto the other platforms as well. All of you YouTubers, all of you kickers. And there we go. All right, so go ahead and click that link. Give us a vote. Tell us which team you think made the best arguments. I'm not asking who you agreed with or who you liked the most. I understand, Bisky, all of them are nice. However, you have to ask yourself which team made the most persuasive arguments tonight. And with that said, I'm going to say absolutely great fucking time. And yeah, I have a shit ton of questions, but I'm going to save mine until after the voting is done and locked in. But I do want to thank all of you for participating tonight. This was a very deep argument that came from multiple different angles. I thought it was really interesting the way that the team compositions made for a very balanced fight, and that each of the pairings seemed to take it in a different direction. So again, it was a testament to why I like these 3v3s as much as I do. Once again, thank all of you guys for your participation tonight, and thank you guys for showing up on time. We're actually like on time tonight, which is really fucking weird, which is the other part. I'm excited to get into the after party. So I'm just going to give you guys a couple more seconds here. Lock in your votes. Did somebody, it sound like somebody had something they wanted to say?
My wife says thank you for us being on time.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, no, you said you're a new dad, right? So congratulations. And yeah, she's going to be very pleased that
2-time. Yeah.
This is the second time. Oh, right on. You didn't learn the first time. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Well, do you get a third count if you adopt?
Yes, actually, they still count.
Shoot, then I'm a dad three time and grandpa 1 time. God
Jesus, you don't look old enough. All right, everybody.
No.
So go ahead and get those votes locked in. I do not see enough votes yet. There is not nearly enough of you guys throwing your hats in the ring. Please tell us who won. I will put this into the chat one more time. You have no fucking excuse. It costs you no money. It is entirely anonymous. Just do it. I also want to say thank you guys. As always, this is some of the best debaters that I've got here, and this was super polite. I thought it was hilarious how Chuck apologized for saying the word fuck, and then like 30 seconds later, Vigi just comes right out the gate with dropping F-bombs like it's Iran. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and lock it in. I hope everybody has had their chance to vote. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's look. Fucking hell. I locked it in at a split 50-50 vote, kids.
Oh my God.
God damn.
So we have.
I can't. You know what? I'm not going to complain.
We are all winners here tonight. We are all winners here tonight. Again,
Yay.
I actually don't disagree with that. I would not have wanted to be the judge here.
Whoever just added the vote to the AF side, you couldn't have done that 10 seconds earlier.
I tried my best, man. I can only needle them so many times before I'm like talking to my fucking self.
Then it went back to 10-10. So yeah. Back to 50-50.
And so sudden death sounds funny, and I'm not opposed to the idea, but we're just
took enough out of me. I can't do a fucking sudden
exactly. I was also thinking about maybe making one of y'all do a steel man, but I'm like, you guys just put in some work. So really, what I'm going to do instead is really, well,
do a steel man. We can do a steel.
Okay. You know what? I think the 2 captains should have to. How about that? So, Vigilante, you're going to go next. Groofus, 2 minutes. Give me up to. I'm putting 2 minutes on the clock. Steelman the opposition for why you think that it should be overturned.
You mean shouldn't be, or am I going first?
You're going first.
No, you're steel manning.
So I was letting Vigi know he was going to be going too.
Oh.
So.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Give me the AF argument.
Yep. Yeah, so I'm just collecting my thoughts really quick.
This is for all the marbles. This is for all the respect, man.
Yeah. Yeah, my brain just I just pulled Alonzo really quick. Democracy assumes rough equality of political voice, not necessarily a perfect equality. Nobody claims that, but a baseline where the resources you can deploy to influence an election to bear some relationship to how many people you actually share views with you. Citizens United broke that baseline by allowing any accumulation of institutional wealth, corporate or union, to be converted directly into political messaging at an unlimited scale. Dark money infrastructure, the 501c4 pathways, the coordination workarounds, none of that matters as much as really the underlying principle. When A single entity can spend hundreds of millions of dollars defining a candidate to voters before that candidate has had a chance to defend themselves. The formal right to vote becomes increasingly hollow. You're not choosing between candidates anymore. You're choosing between the images that the best funded outside groups have constructed for you. And the disclosure argument doesn't fully answer this. Knowing who is spending the money tells you the best source of the influence. It doesn't reduce the influence itself. A $1 billion ad campaign with a disclosed donor is still a $1 billion ad campaign. Transparency is necessary, it's not sufficient. And when it comes to the book argument, the incumbent argument, and the union symmetry, these are real points, but they're answers to the mechanism, not the underlying problem. The underlying problem is that unlimited spending by any entity, disclosed or not, creates a real political environment where resources matter more than voters. That's worth taking seriously, even if Citizens United isn't the perfect vehicle for addressing it.
All right. Even had it landed on the button.
I of course had it written down. I just wanted to use my steel man.
Sure. Pre-written. Now Vigi's going to have to pull one out of his... All right, Vigilante. 2 minutes is on the clock. Give me your best steel man. Give me the negative arguments.
Yeah, so we shouldn't limit what associations of people can spend their money on, because this would violate free speech and it would violate the First Amendment. The most important thing in this country is our ability to have freedom of speech and influence the government through our democracy. Citizens United did not cause the problems that we see today with the dark money in politics. What caused it was the system that was in place beforehand. The system specifically created by the IRS. These laws allow for 501c4s to not for 501c4s to continue to influence political beliefs of the country while not having to disclose their donors. This creates the dark money loophole that we see today, and that the AF was ragging against.
That's what you got?
Coming up with this on the spot. That's kind of.
That's all right. No worries. You did your best there. All right. So we know that the vote was already in the lock and it's coming out as a tie. But do we want to look again now that we've had that little sudden death, just out of curiosity? I feel like we should take a look. It's fucking still tied. Okay, yeah. Okay. It's fucking tied.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Cool. It is just destined. People do not agree on this one, including myself. All right. Thank you all to all of tonight's debaters. We hope this has been as awesome for you guys as it has been for us. We are always open to feedback and suggestions, so please let us know if you have any ideas on how we can improve the experience for you. Above all, thank you to all of the viewers. We wouldn't be here without you guys. We are doing this every Friday and Saturday night, starting at 7 p.m. and 6 p.m. respectively. So make sure you give us that follow, sub, like, whatever the thing is. Give it a thumbs up. And that way you will get the notifications every time we go live. Subs and donors are always nice. They help to keep the production improving. And once those become more regular, we will be sharing it with the winning debaters. So help us out if you can. But if you can also help us just by spreading the word, that would be awesome. Just tell other people about what we're doing here. And finally, if you haven't already, go ahead and join into the free Discord server where you can take part in the conversations after the lights go off and the cameras go away. That is where you can tell me if you are interested in participating and in giving this whole debate thing a shot. So we hope to see you guys for the next round, and everything else that you're about to see is going to be live or paid subs on Twitch only. So